I'd assumed my doom was inevitable once she found out who I was. I couldn't blame Ashley. What else was to be expected from her? The most feared second year in all of Brown Hill Comprehensive, on discovering the existence of me, the most unfortunate offspring of said school's headmaster. Years later, Dad was destined to see the error of his ways, apologizing for insisting I attend his school. Ashley, for her part, had a family reputation to uphold. Her twin elder brothers had been havoc wreckers of the fifth form before they were expelled for phoning in a bomb threat hoax. A familiar snigger had alerted the school secretary to the callers' identities. And her dad, as I'd once overheard my parents discuss in furtive whispers, was a living legend of infamy within the hallowed halls of the Brown Hill staff room. His ultimate expellable offense was trying to set fire to the aforementioned staff room. Nice. Despite my many efforts to publicly disassociate myself from my surname, I acquired a shadow whenever I strayed into the seams of the school timetable. Denied the pleasure of each other's company during classes, Ashley seemed ferociously happy to make up for it. Skulking in corridors, hissing unflattering words of advice across the dining hall, shoving one of her obliging sidekicks in my direction, initializing my performance of knocking against random lockers, tables, chairs, sixth formers, dining ladies, dinner ladies, even to my uttermost mortification. Mr. Henderson, the physics teacher, and Chris Hemsworth look-alike, of whom I was both terrified and enamored. Dear Ashley had exceeding talent in the schoolgirl thuggery department.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Edmonds. I'm the editor-in-chief of For Page and Screen magazine. I'm here today with Anne van Wijgerden, the author of Sins of Our Fathers, that we had the honor of publishing in our ninth issue. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
My pleasure.
So happy to have you here. I really, really enjoyed this. Um, I'm very bad at writing short stories that are actually short in nature. So anytime we come across a piece, a submission that is actually short in nature and like really, really striking in how it's executed, I absolutely love it. So I'm so thrilled to talk with you about this story. Um, just to start with something easy, hopefully, could you tell me a little bit about what inspired this piece?
Yes, it actually was written. I was just checking the details now. Back in February 2021, so we're talking about quite a few years ago, as my very first assignment for my very first online writing class from International Writers Collective based in Amsterdam. And yeah, the assignment was simply write a story, short story, as an older narrator looking back at her past and remembering something difficult, but remembering it in a light way. That was basically the assignment. So, I started digging around in my own past, and this thing really happened. So, yeah, so it's easy to write in that sense. I just remembered.
I'm so sorry that this happened to you. Um, but
Yes.
yeah, no, it does read very much like something that is very relatable. I think the tone, that kind of looking back at something that was difficult, but in a positive way, in a way that shows like, oh, we've grown past this, is kind of what caught my attention with the piece as well, because
Mm.
the narrator here has such a strong voice. It's very um mature, but still kind of like we're getting the sense of like reminiscing through teenage years, all of this. And I absolutely love that tone. Knowing the context of the prompt makes a lot of sense because that absolutely
Yeah.
comes through. Um, what was kind of, since you were kind of pulling from memory, also dealing with the constraints of the prompt, did those things make this easier to write, more difficult to write? How did that kind of balance out for you?
Yeah, that it was my first taste of what was to be years of joy, in the sense of I kept doing courses in all they're just 8-week blocks, and you look at a piece of writing, and a teacher guides you through, and then you give an assignment based on a certain instructions, and it being given some guidelines gives kind of some, yeah, it's very helpful in learning the craft. And I've enjoyed doing that ever since. I really like a bit of, prompting. Prompts. If someone's good at giving a prompt, then you're my best friend. Yeah, so yeah. And it was actually, I have to say also, it sounds a bit, I don't want to overdo it, but it's in some ways therapeutic, because you look back at something that happens and it makes you walk through it and look into the details and realize things you'd never seen before. And I have to say right from the start, because I'm now 66, this was something that happened in the 1970s. So to make it more, the first draft was with the real names and the real, it's set in them. But later, more recent drafts, I updated it like by 20 years. So set in now, this current story, it's set in 2010, and with changed names, and yeah, to make it more. But yeah, as it was, I started, seeing things from yeah, her original name was Michelle, but from Ashley's point of view, she indeed she had a reputation as well that she needed to, yeah, live up to, until she decided not to. Oh, that's a spoiler. But anyway, yeah, yeah. So that's, yeah, breaking away in a sense of the sins of our fathers. That's also what it's about, in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting having that kind of aged up sounds is the wrong phrase, like the relocated to a more contemporary time or a more recent time.
Mm.
Um, is really interesting because the experience still does hold true. The experience is kind of
Mm.
universal. People, you're used to, oh, well, that's her reputation over here. And then you have like the teacher's kid or the headmaster's kid here, and the reputation still kind of hold true.
Mm.
No matter what year it's in, no matter what time it's
Yeah, some
in.
things are timeless. Yeah,
Mhm,
I don't if you saw that award-winning British of adolescence.
mhm, mhm,
That I think it's the second episode or so. They do a one shot, and it includes going through a school,
mhm, mhm,
and then obviously it's more, recent current events, but it is utterly recognizable, the kind of madness, the manic chaos, and it's just like you. Also watching that, I thought that's how it was. You had to have friends, otherwise you didn't survive. It was so recognizable, and precisely they did it because they did it in one shot. They caught the atmosphere, and even the main character, or some of the main characters, they're kind of saying that. It even they're saying, "Oh, we've got to get out of here. This is brings back too many memories of school days." But yeah, it's probably the world over. There's good stuff and bad stuff, but yeah,
mhm,
yeah, going through the memories.
mhm, mhm. Absolutely. And with kind of the good and the bad here with Ashley, her character, this decision to be like, I was thinking about this. There's no need. I know you said spoiler. They have had time.
Yeah,
Our listeners have had time, and they should still go read it, even if they haven't yet. It has been
agreed.
a
Yeah,
while. Um,
yeah,
so spoilers are allowed. But
good.
it's a really great moment because we as the reader and the narrator as well with this more reflective tone, like we all recognize the futility of it in a way. Like, what is the point of going
Yeah,
through this fight? What is the point of going through the motions that have been gone through every generation that has gone through here? Um, that moment, that twist kind of like right at the end is really interesting where we get the character being like, there's no point, there's no need. And I know you said you were pulling from life, but just narratively, I'm curious about your choice to make Ashley be the one to do that and to say that.
mm, yep. Yes, she was, and she is actually in some way she. I might look a bit brave, but she's the hero because, and this is something I even realized recently, thinking again about this story. You think about a bit of fiction, and it makes you reflect on some hidden truth in what actually happened, and that is that when she challenged me for a fight, and I said yes, I did that not because I was brave, but I'm too polite. I'm too polite. I didn't want to offend her. You know, she wanted something, I was going to give it to her. And so that my politeness actually got us into a, you know, she was most likely expecting me to say, no, you know, or something to that effect. But, you know, she, okay. She wants to fight. Oh, okay, that's what you want. And think about the consequences later. But my driving force of being a people pleaser was, you know, and wanting to be polite and being scared of letting people down. So that, ironically enough, that was what got us into this fix of needing to have. It was also part of the setup, and so if yeah, it was actually herself that turned things around and came to her senses, or realized that maybe maybe it wasn't worth it for her in the end. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. And I love that moment narratively as well because we kind of, I don't, I feel weird talking about this knowing it's from your personal experience, as I don't
No,
want to
you're
say
welcome.
anything that comes across the wrong way.
No, go for it. It's a long time ago.
Because honestly, I would probably do the same. I'd be like, okay, I'm not confrontational to the point of agreeing to a confrontation.
Yes,
No,
exactly.
I understand that on a personal level. But
Mm,
yeah, I feel like that kind of dichotomy where it's like, okay, this is what's expected. This is what you want. You were kind of like the figure who seems to have the most social power, Ashley being that figure, I mean, like, and so it's just like, okay, let's go along with it. Kind of saying, like, this is kind of how it keeps repeating. People being like, oh, this is what's expected. This is what we should do. Let's just go
yeah.
along with it. And I think if I think to like other various pop culture things, usually you see the person who is for lack of a better word, the victim in the situation being the one to call reason and somehow get through to the bully. And this is kind of on the head of that, kind of turning it around. And I really love that because it's like it humanizes her in a way as well, saying like, no, she isn't just someone following along with the crowd. Like she recognizes the harm here and she recognizes how to kind of there's no reason for this. Let's just step back. And it probably
Mm.
was, in actuality, the surprise of your response that made her be like, wait a second, what?
I might get into a spot of bother with this. I bash up the high school. I don't know. But I tell you, I was relieved. I mean, goodness. Yeah. And she never, by the way, she never bothered me again. You know, it's great. She stuck to it.
Amazing.
You know, it was the truth, and that was it. In fact, we respected each other.
That's great. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm glad it all worked out in the end.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I am curious. Do you often kind of draw from real life experiences or your past in your writing, or is this kind of a new dabbling for you?
No, no. So mostly I write poetry, and that is all about moments in your life that you just gotta, okay. This is a moment I've got to write about this. What you know, and so yeah, yeah. It's very rarely that it hasn't got anything to do with real life. And in fact, so I just, well, just last year, by some miracle, I managed to get a poetry collection published. And if anything, it's actually a diary for me. You know, it's like a journal for me. If no one else understands what the heck I'm talking about, I know flipping well what I'm talking about. So yeah, it's very much to do with real life. It's a way of processing real life, actually, for me at least.
Congrats on that poetry collection. That is, I actually had that written down. Dear Planet, right?
Yes. Oh, of course I have it. La, 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 la.
Nice. Congrats.
Yeah,
That's so exciting.
thank you. Yeah, no, it was, yeah, that, yeah. Yeah, and what actually, because as you see from the cover, it's an amazing cover. Of course I'm biased, but it was actually a Filipino artist friend who did the cover for me, and that whole process of finding out that the publisher. Well, that's actually what attracted me to trying the publisher in the first place, because I noticed on the website they had amazing book covers, and that's not always the case for poetry collections.
Sure.
And they didn't even, when you saw the information, they didn't even publish poetry as non-fiction, fiction, and children's stories. So I just wrote them and said, "Do you happen to publish poetry too?" They said, "Well, send us something and we'll see." So yeah, long story short, it worked out, and their policy is indeed, once they've signed a contract with a writer, then they commission an artist especially for that work. And so I asked, I know someone who's very good in the Philippines. I was in the Philippines at the time, and she read the manuscript and produced this. And it just it's also very thrilling when someone else captures visually all that is to say, even if people don't understand what the heck I'm talking about, they have a nice looking book on their bookshelf.
Well, it sounds like your poems very much get across what you're talking about. If someone can read
Yeah.
it and then capture it in artistic
Yeah.
form. That
Oh,
sounds great.
thank you. Nice point.
You made it first. But yeah, no, absolutely. That's really, really fantastic. And poetry is so interesting. We don't, for Patron Screen, we don't publish poetry, unfortunately. Only, really, the only reason is because we would not be able to read the amount of submissions we got if we published poetry. That is,
Yes.
it is a practical decision. It is
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
Tori and I love poetry, but we just could not.
Yeah. You'll be flooded.
Yes, yes. But yeah, poetry is really, really interesting because I feel like a lot of people, how can I phrase this in a way that doesn't sound mean? A lot of, I ask myself that all the time, which is terrible. Um,
I know the
um,
dilemma.
yes. I feel like poetry is something many, many people dabble in, but not many people spend a lot of time on to actually um, perfect their craft, I should say. I'll phrase it that way. And I always love talking to poets because poetry is not my forte personally. I am one of those people who does not practice enough to do it perfectly. So I love hearing kind of the process. Are you the type of person who kind of it comes to you? Are you the type of person who obsesses over word choice? Kind of what is your approach to poetry? Because I've heard many different, and I'm always curious.
Yes, everyone has their own ways, and my ways have changed as well. I mean, like now I'm doing one of these courses right now these weeks, and this course from the International Writers Corporate Collective is focused on poetry, and so every week you get an assignment. I'm loving it, but when I'm not having a course, it's something that happens in life. Yeah, I see a beautiful bug on a tree. And it just it matches with a conflicting thought. I mean, and I have to capture it. It's like taking a photo. It's a moment in time, and you take a photo, and it might be just a word or two words or a line, and then I will type it on my phone, and I'll come back to it later, and see if it's going anywhere. And what I love about this poetry thing, and it sounds so in the navel gazing, but I just find it fascinating that often I come to write the end of a poem and I realize that this poem is my subconscious telling me something that my consciousness hadn't realized about why it was so fascinating or why that bug on that particular tree caught my attention, because there was actually something else going on. And yeah, so I'm just fascinated by the process of poetry writing. whether you get published or not, or just and the process of poetry reading. It's, different people can read the same poem and it can resonate in completely different ways, and I love that. Yeah, poetry can change your life, really. Well, writing can change your life. It doesn't have to be poetry, of course.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's interesting hearing you talk about it because it reminds me of something that whether or not it comes across, I don't know, but I always try to tell my students that writing itself is an exploration. And oftentimes, the biggest thing I hear, because I teach a lot of first year writing students, among other things, but they're always like, I don't know
Lovely.
exactly what my point is. So I can't start. So I can't, like, I don't know where it's going. So I can't start. And I'm like, that's the point. You don't know where you're going. So start. So write and figure
It's
it out.
adventure.
Mhm,
Yeah, no one knows. That's very normal not to know where you go, where you're going to
mhm,
end up. That's the
mhm,
excitement of it. That's really the excitement of it.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like it's a lot easier to do that in poetry and fiction than it is in essay writing. But none of them listen to this podcast, but they should, and they should know what happens in essay writing too. Um, but but yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. When well, I had a question and then I went on a ramble, and now I don't remember my question.
So,
But
okay.
it
But I
happened.
love that you're teaching. I love that you're teaching it. I
Thanks.
have a little bit of teaching experience myself, but very unofficially. But I
Mhm,
know the joy of seeing young people, discover things. And yeah.
mhm.
So I'm very happy for you that you're in that.
Thanks, thanks. Yeah, I never expected to be a teacher. It was never um a life goal of mine, I should say. I kind of happened into it and I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. Um,
Yeah, no, yeah, no. I
mhm,
think that's sometimes the best way to get into it because, like, my dad was a teacher and then became a headmaster. My
mhm,
mum was a teacher. Their parents were teachers. I come from a long line of teachers, and I was determined as a teenager, if there's one thing in my life I was never going to do, was going to be teaching. Because I think also because my parents saw it as a mission in life. They had it like a higher calling. And I
mhm,
knew I wasn't up to that. And so, I was looking at all other kind of things. But long story short, by the time I reached, I was 38, living in Holland, the Netherlands. I was married, I had two children, and I needed a job. And I just saw an advert in the local paper here in the Netherlands for native English speakers to teach English at a private language school. And you didn't need any qualifications or past experience, which I didn't have. So I jumped in there and I taught for about 9 years, and I loved it so much. It was mostly businessmen you were teaching or in company training, but and later went on to teach teenagers in the Philippines, but just finding out that it was actually in the genes. However much I tried to resist it. But yeah, the joy of teaching, I think it's sometimes that is great to come to that. Not the official, and the official route is fine, of course, and I can't say anything against that. But sometimes the unofficial route, and you're there not just, but yeah, because it's something you love doing and that you can do.
mhm,
And
mhm.
kids know that, they you can't pull the wool over their eyes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's they will not hold back if their opinions and that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Actually, speaking of teaching, it sounds weird to say I was compiling research before this interview. I was looking through your biographical statement. It wasn't that
Mm.
deep dive. But I noticed that you have also co-founded an educational nonprofit, correct? Young Focus. I would love if you
Yes,
could talk a little bit
yes.
about that.
Yeah, and you're going to have to shut me up this morning. No, but so my husband and I, uh, yeah, okay, short version. So for the last 18 years, we've been living and working in the Philippines. Right now, of course, I'm in the Netherlands, but and we set up something called Young Focus, which helps children and teenagers and young adults experience a full education. So they get sponsored to the local schools, your local colleges and universities. We also have a kindergarten for the younger kids. Sorry, a nursery school for the younger kids, as well as another big part of the program is for young people, well, kids of all ages actually, who've dropped out of school, never been to school. Um, and so we have like a school where they're in for 2 years or 1 year or 2 years, and then they're ready to sit in a classroom, and then they go on to stream on, so to speak, to the local schools, and that way hopefully experience a full education. Because these kids come from families, it's really, I don't think it's exaggeration to say this part of Manila is one of the poorest corners of the universe. I mean, people, yeah, they're scavenging through garbage, doing the most basic jobs in order to earn some pesos so they can feed their family for the evening. And we've just seen through the years that a big answer to extreme poverty is a full education. It sounds very cliche, but it's just true. If a child can have a full education and have the qualifications, then they can choose a career, and they're not condemned to that vicious cycle of poverty. They're not condemned to being having the same kind of work experience that their parents have and survive by. And yeah, so we have about 40 colleagues. My husband and my husband, yeah, as I mentioned before, my husband's Dutch, but we're the only foreigners. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing. And so all our colleagues are from the Philippines, professionals, employed full-time, teachers, and all kinds of academic backgrounds. And we support about 1,000 kids through these programs. That's in a big nutshell what we did and do.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love the educational focus there. I love that you have such a broad network of kids that you're supporting through that program. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'm curious as to kind of how you got started with that, because that feels like something that would take a lot of groundwork to kind of get started and get working on.
Yeah, I mean, it was completely unplanned. It's not like Paul and I sat down and thought, what we're going to do with our lives. And we could have, what Young Focus is today, we would not have had in our imaginations. How it evolved, it really is a kind of very organic evolution, was through the years and through it was an incredible amount of collaboration from all kinds of people, because we exist because of funding from individuals, funding agencies, churches, groups of people, anyone, we also have a sponsorship organization, set up. But it started, it started way back in 1919. The seeds of it started in 1980. Well, in 1987, Paul and I got married, and we have Christian backgrounds, Dutch, English, evangelical, and I know it means very different things in different countries. So, and we had we were working for a international missionary organization in Amsterdam, and we met and we fell in love and we got married. And I had married someone, thankfully, who was very socially minded. Like what would Jesus do to do with poverty and discrimination? And I was just the kind of evangelical Christian who was like, everyone gets saved, and that's all that matters. Forget this earth, we're going to heaven. I mean, now when I think about it, my toes curl up and everything. But that's how I was. And so my husband got me reading the right kind of books, and I started thinking about the situation in the world. So basically, it sounds very, I don't know what it sounds like, but we just thought, what can we do in the world? What can we do in the world that do some good? And we first thought, what about, we'd seen a video. This is really long time ago, before the internet, and we'd seen this video of someone on Smoky Mountain, which was a massive garbage dump in Manila, and he was doing very basic healthcare, primary healthcare, and because as you can imagine, the healthcare situation on a garbage dump where people were living and working was horrendous. And we decided to get training. So we went on a primary healthcare course together in the Philippines. And this healthcare school, it was a very intensive 9 months. So, but there's no way you're a doctor or nurse or anything at the end of it. You're just a primary healthcare worker. And the things they allowed you to do in the 1980s, they would not allow you to do now. But yeah, those were grim and desperate times. But we used to, it was right by where we stayed, was right by this great garbage dump. And we just, again, it sounds cliche, but we fell in love with the people and we didn't want to leave. And so for a couple of years, we did stay on and do primary healthcare work. And then at some stage, but in that, on that mission base, so to speak, there was a couple that was doing very basic school sponsorship. And we could see, we were busy with healthcare, and healthcare is extremely needed there. But my husband, being Dutch and very pragmatic, saw that, began to see that education is actually the long-term solution. And so when this American couple left and asked us if we wanted to take over, we said yes. And so for a little time, for a couple of years, we did that. But that was part of the missionary organization, and it was now looking back, this is the basics of what we do now. But then it's a messy story, because so altogether it'd been 5 years in the Philippines, and we were in this evangelical bubble that had no clue about mental health, and everything was pretty spiritualized. So it was the devil, but in terms of exaggerating a bit, but people, all the stress of the extreme poverty we were dealing with. Paul had a child dying in his arms, for example. It's not like there was any kind of professional care, and that plus getting some health issues for my husband, we just, in a nutshell, we burned out in a very relatively dramatic fashion, a very fast fashion, and we just had to suddenly leave the country with our missionary tails between our legs, so to speak, feeling complete failures. And we came back to the Netherlands, and we didn't go back to the Philippines for a visit till 9 years later, because that was the beginning of a very difficult, long journey of depression for my husband. And we had to discover, my husband actually discovered graphic design and set up his own studio, and I discovered teaching, and we raised our children, and we thought the chapter Philippines was over. And it was on a visit back that we suddenly realized maybe it wasn't. And so 14 years after we'd left the country, we returned to start Young Focus. So it's not like we just, we knew what we were doing. No, it's a very messy journey of, ups and downs. But we came back to the Philippines, a lot older and a lot less impressed with ourselves. We knew how wrong things can go. And so, and we knew we needed the collaboration with other people. And we were not, and another important fact, we were no longer in our missionary bubble anymore. We wanted to work with everybody and anybody, not just, our little clique of, whatever it was. So we came back very different from how we'd left the country. But it's a very long, messy story.
No, it's a wonderful story. And it definitely sounds like that time there before with the missionary is absolutely, it sounds like it was very difficult, but very essential to what you're doing now.
To sow the seeds. Yeah.
Absolutely. Have you ever considered writing about your time over that period? That feels like something someone could write about. So
no, the people keep saying that, and I keep resisting.
Fair enough.
So thank you for the prod. Yeah. Yeah, but again, my tendency is to I want to make it into fiction because to talk about everything is too, um, yeah, nonfiction has yeah. If you start talking about real people and there's some uncomfortable truths there, you don't. Ooh. Sometimes it's easier to hide it within the volume of a story. But yeah, yeah, one day maybe though.
We'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see. But no, absolutely. And even if you choose not to, your experiences there have still colored your work and the way that you write. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was very writing poetry going back, especially I don't know if you're aware of some of the Philippines' uh, political history, recent history. Um, uh, that they had for 6 years they had what's known as the war on drugs, where Rodrigo Duterte had basically declared that he would kill anyone he even suspected of using drugs. And basically, indeed the police did get a green light to kill without any questions, and it was 6 years of horrendous thing, and people nicknamed it the war on the poor because sometimes it sounds grim, and it was grim, but it felt like a culling, that sometimes people don't know what to do with poverty, so they just erase it, under the carpet, kind of in a most horrific way, like as suddenly as though. But also being there in the country at the time and seeing, for example, on Facebook, Filipinos love Facebook. Facebook is, yeah. And how quickly people were propagandized into believing that murder was a legitimate option for problems. It was horrifying, how people manipulated and it's so poetry for me. What does that matter? But yeah, I could write about it. Yeah, and that's actually what this is. It looks a nice. Looks like a nice nature shot, but it's actually pretty. There's a black side to it. It's a dark side to it because it's a lot about the of what was going on in the Philippines at the time, the injustice of people just getting yeah, killed without any question, just because they were poor and couldn't fight back. Yeah. So yeah, that was has been a very grim chapter in Philippines history. And and that, so that Rodrigo Duterte is now with in prison in Den Haag, the international court. He's now on trial, and the publisher of the Planet is based in Den Haag, The Hague. So it felt, as it was meant to be.
A little fitting, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that finding a way to process that, even living there and seeing that and kind of witnessing all of it firsthand, processing that has to be very difficult. And I can imagine
Mm.
that poetry absolutely would be a good way to kind of help work through is not the phrase that I want to say, but kind of
No, no, I know what you
contextualize
mean. Yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I even wrote a poem about the dilemma of writing about something that was, yeah, it just felt so inappropriate somehow.
Mhm.
Here am I, an English person, and I'm expressing outrage, but it's easy for me to write a poem. But yeah, what about in the meantime?
Mhm.
But thankfully there are Filipino writers who really reported it. Journalists, very brave journalists who collected the data and wrote stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great that they were able to do that.
Mm.
Unfortunate, extremely tragic that it happened. But
Mm.
but yeah. Um, I definitely understand that dilemma is very complex, but I think the fact that
Mm.
I mean this is maybe a flippant weird thing for me to say.
Mm.
But I think the fact that you're even considering that and kind of taking it in the context of your position in the conversation as you're kind of even just through poetry, entering that conversation is really
Mm,
important and a really good thing to do too.
mm. Yeah. And so the other thing that helped get me and my husband through it all, for me, it was poetry, but for both of us, um, when we'd gone back to the Philippines after 14 years being away, we had decided that whatever we were going to do, we were going to not do what we'd done before, which was live right in the city, right next to, the office, right there. It sounds a very noble thing to do, but we couldn't hack it for more than 5 years. And so we thought, if we're going to be serious about the long term, we knew by then we needed nature. So we were going to look for a place that had some green around it. Because where we had lived, it's like you don't see a blade of grass for weeks on end. It was just sometimes so grim. But so we chose to live on the kind of east side boundary of the city. And it did mean it was only about 30 kilometers away from the office from where we worked. But because of Manila traffic, it could take 1.5 hours, 2.5 hours because of traffic. But it was worth it because we were sitting surrounded by green and trees and bugs and birds and whatever else was happening in the world. And we were also there during the pandemic, some of the pandemic. Whatever else was happening in the world, they were doing their thing. And that was so, so soothing and calming and absolutely life-saving, it felt like. And that's what I write a lot about too, is and so I became a bird watcher, a bit of a bird watcher, simply because, well, there's so much out there. And that was also a transformation that happens through the arc of the poetry. It's in a way that I go from being someone, actually from my evangelical background, who sees myself as, we're the humans, we're the ultimate creation, and we're kind of in charge of, we can use the earth as we like because it's going to burn anyway. That I'm putting it very extremely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that extreme version to and it took years to sitting there watching birds, and instead of feeling like an outside observer, like I am watching the birds, or sometimes they're watching me, but to realizing, I am a human, I am a creature, they are fellow creatures, it's actually us. I'm watching, but I am part of it. This is part of me. I'm part of this world. And I am also surprised how long it took me, but that was almost like a conversion experience that happened over time, to, instead of being an outside observer, realizing I'm part of this. No wonder I need it. No wonder cutting myself off from it does me no good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that connection and kind of bringing everything together through nature and kind of connecting with nature is a really, really wonderful thing. Um, this is a bit, I'm kind of jumping around a bit, and I apologize for that.
No.
But I was curious if you could tell me a little bit about how you got started with writing in general. Like, what kind of
Mm.
was the spark to get you started?
I think I actually, funny enough, I've only just realized it now. The spark happened when I was at that school that I'm writing about in the 1970s. Ha, ha. Sorry, revelation. So I was, yeah, then because I was about 12 or 13, and and so this was a school near Birmingham in the middle of the UK. And in Birmingham, you had radio stations, BBC radio stations all over the country, also in Birmingham. And they had a Saturday show for kids. And they had this competition, where you could write in write a story and send it in. And so I wrote a horror story about, and it was actually just the route. This is using real life, about some people who were walking the route that I would usually walk to school. I had a lot of time to think about it. And a little horror story about a monster, because you walk past this little lake, and this horror story, this monster in the lake. And I wrote a story about it. and then and it kind of won. And what? But horror of horrors, then they asked me to come in and read it on radio. I didn't know that because I'd gotten rid. I didn't have a manuscript. I didn't. In those days, I wrote, didn't send it in. So I came in completely flustered, and that's another story. But yeah, that was. And then my tutor at that school, she was normally very, emotionless and strict and stern, but I saw she was so excited about it and so proud of me, and said something like, "Oh, maybe you should write," and that sowed a seed for later. The first time I fell in love. What do you do with those feelings? My goodness, and sometimes to, just let rip in writing. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I love that a horror story was your start. I'm a huge horror fan, so I'm like, yes. That's
Mm.
great. That's so
Yeah.
great. It's so fun. I feel like you could write a horror story about needing to walk into a radio station and read something you
Yeah.
don't have as well.
Yeah. 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 Later, I did actually work. Oh, maybe I should send you that. It's a short story, but it's actually based on real life of a horror story that happened in a radio station in the Netherlands. Anyway, I may
Ooh,
send that to you.
amazing, amazing. I look forward to it. That's
Mm.
that's so awesome. Speaking of genres, though, I know you said you write mostly or primarily poetry, but when you do work in fiction, do you like to play around with genre? Because I know this is very literary, this is very contemporary, The Sins of Our Fathers.
Mm.
But you mentioned horror. Do you like to dabble in things? Do you kind of stick with one?
Good story. That's a good question. Um, yeah, it's remains short stories for sure, and more, I want to the point of flash fiction. I think 700 words, between 700 and 1,200. My sweet spot. um, yeah, yeah, it's science fictiony, sometimes quite bizarre. Although as a kid I did, go and wanted to write this horror story. I'm way too, I'm way too scaredy cat to really get into it. But though I absolutely adore Stranger Things and what's it called, The Burrows,
I
on a
love that show.
Netflix series,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of horror. Well, it's not that I can watch because it's not horror for horror's sake. It's got such an amazing story and such great characters that will keep me watching the TV and not hiding behind the couch or something like that. But yeah, in terms of my own writing, I stick to fairly light short stories, flash fiction,
Mhm.
and yeah, I'm not that adventuresome in fiction writing yet,
Yeah.
but the times can change. Maybe I think sometimes when you do a course that can, be a writing course, can kind of throw down the gauntlet and challenge to kind of step out of your comfort zone,
Mhm.
and sometimes just reading good fiction, with the assignment, try writing like that, can get you finding out that daring to have a voice that didn't have before.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
you never stop learning.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have just from my own personal experience, I'm working on a manuscript right now that is not a genre that I
Ah,
usually write. Um,
ah.
and it came about, it came about in the silliest way possible.
So that's
Um,
the best way.
yes, yes. But no, I got really into writing fan fiction for like a year and a half.
Oh yeah.
Wrote nothing but, and then I'm like, you know what? In my actual original writing, I never write just contemporary fiction or like just contemporary romance. I always write like fantasy horror genre things.
Mm.
But that was almost exclusively what I was writing in fan fiction was the contemporary romance literary things. And I'm like, I might as well try that not in fan fiction and actually make it original. So that's what I'm working on, and it's
Ooh.
weird. It's good
Ooh,
weird, but
nice.
weird to do something different.
Yes. And is it a collection of stories, or is it a novel, or is it a short story, or
Um,
what's it?
yeah,
How long is it going to be?
it'll be novel length. It'll be novel length. I've been working on it
Ooh,
for about 2 weeks now, and I just like literally 10 minutes before we hopped on the Zoom call, just hit 29,000 words. So
wow!
it'll
Congratulations.
thanks. I'm really bad at writing
Wow.
short things, so pretty much everything I
I'm bad. I'm
write is
super
the
bad at
long
writing
end.
long things. I have the opposite problem. I could never write a novel. For me, that just sounds like too much hard work.
My problem is short fiction. I'm like, how do you say so much in so little? I can't. I'm too wordy. I ramble too much. Um,
No, it's a gift. It's a gift. Gosh, yeah. Uh,
mm,
Actually, from that writing group, from that first writing course I did, excuse me, from where Sins of the Fathers comes out of, uh, that was I've done quite a few courses since then, but that first writing course, of the 10 of us in the class, or 10, something like that, there was like 6 of us who just wanted to keep going together. So we formed our own group, and we've been going ever since, although it's mostly 4 of us. But we just use the things we'd learned in class, and we've become friends, and they give me so much feedback. Now I've forgotten what I was going to tell you. That Oh yes. So in that group, there's one friend who's writing a novel, and I just see what and she's giving us things to critique, and getting feedback from us, and it's just so much more work, obviously, than poetry. It's much more work than a poetry collection, I tell you. So I respect you guys. Phew.
no, I have all the respect for poets. Like I said before, poetry is not my forte. I have one poetry chapbook that by some miracle exists out in the world now. And I'm
Ah.
just like, speaking of having it right on hand,
Oh,
I have a box of them
yeah.
sitting underneath
Oh,
the
oh,
my computer.
wow.
So,
Is it
um,
on? Is it online? Can I read it on? Is there poetry
yeah,
online?
yeah, it's
I'll Google you.
from Bottle Cap Press. I think they do
Oh, Boscat.
have,
Yeah.
um, I think they have digital copies, like PDF copies. It's called Resurrection of the Ferns, because why not? I like
Nice,
plants.
nice title. Mm.
Thanks. But yeah, and I think poetry collections are so much work because I obsessed over what order to put those poems in for the longest time. And I'm like, I don't even know. Should I add more? Should I take? And that was only like 22 pages. So I cannot imagine a full
Mm.
collection.
Mm.
So also have all the respect for you guys. Um, but I did actually want to ask about the online writing classes that you've mentioned. I've never
Mm.
done something that is purely online. I was in a hybrid program for my MFA that we were kind of online, kind of not. It was more like an online forum and then meeting every so many months in person. But I'm curious about how the format of those classes go. Are they Zoom meetings? Are they kind of online
Yeah.
forums?
They're based in Amsterdam, and they have in-person classes, but I've never actually been to one, even though I've been in the Netherlands quite a bit, but only done online, which is a Zoom lesson. So the Zoom class is like 1 hour, and you have a teacher. And by the way, like our teacher is currently in the States, so and the rest of us are in Germany and the Netherlands. So that also is great in terms of, if you like, for us it's 8 o'clock in the evening, and for her, she's a teacher at a university, and then she hops off real life teaching, and hops on and teaches us. But so, by the way, it works if you're in the States. But you have the 1 hour class where you talk a bit about the previous week's assignment, but it's mostly because it's a poetry. This at the moment we're doing poetry, so the teacher has picked a poem for a certain reason. Maybe it's the structure or the style or something, and we look at it and we read it and we think about it and we discuss it, and then we have an assignment. And so as I say, the class is only 1 hour, but until the next lesson, you have time to submit your assignment, and then you critique two of the assignments, or 2 or 3, depends on which level of class you're doing. And you're also taught how to critique. So it's all, so you're really taught about editing, and so therefore editing yourself, you know. So I have so enjoyed these classes, and this way of doing things, because it makes it so accessible. I did try and do it from the Philippines, but I only did it once because the time difference was just, you know, it affected my whole week afterwards. Every time it does. But yeah, yeah, it's that's the setup. But I love the way it exposes you to all kinds of different styles and all kinds of different authors, and yeah, so it's you know, to relish the talent of other people, and to see how, you know, what you can learn from them and their ways of going about writing.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. I know I have lots of students who will ask me if the university I teach at, they have a creative writing undergraduate degree. And so I have students who have gone through that asking if they should go on to get an MFA. And I
Mm,
always am a little torn on what to tell them because I have an MFA. I loved it. It was great for the getting to constantly write, getting that kind of outside perspective, seeing the way other people are writing. But I'm also like, it is also a huge financial commitment. And is
mm,
it worth it
mm.
practically unless you're going into academia, maybe not. So I love this
Yeah,
idea of the classes maybe being a more accessible kind of step
and
into getting
it's eight
that.
weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's eight
yeah.
weeks of your life, and
Hmm.
it's not cheap, but it's not cheap, but it's not the most expensive, really isn't.
Hmm.
And then I
Hmm.
tell you, every time I've finished a course, I have this material that I can
Hmm.
go over and submit,
Hmm.
and you know, so that out of that has churned out a lot of poems and stories, you know, that have inspired, prompted this stuff. So I would say it almost earns itself back. But yeah, and let alone the fact that I found a writing community from the first class,
Hmm.
as well as meeting all kinds of people online. And again, when it comes to poetry, discovering wow, people have such different tastes and styles.
Hmm.
That's the way. Yeah,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
exposure is great.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like the exposure is great. Community is a huge thing in writing because it's such an
Yeah,
isolating craft
it is,
otherwise
isn't it?
it is until it isn't. If you're not in one of the writing groups and then all of a sudden
Mm.
you're trying to publish and you have five people looking at your manuscript or looking at your work and you're like, wait, who are all of these
Yeah,
voices?
yeah, yeah.
So getting that community experience ahead of time could be really, really
Yeah.
wonderful. Mhm.
Mm.
Speaking of producing work, I was going to ask if you're working on anything new lately, if you have anything coming up you want to share with our listeners.
No, I'm just writing poetry for the next collection. And yeah. What's the latest? Yeah, yeah. But I think the latest thing published actually is was this. No, it was the short story. So, but that's. I was so glad that early on, before I got published, before the collection was published, I read the story of someone who described in great detail what it was like to have their debut poetry collection, and I'll never forget what he said about, you know, it's published and then you keep writing. You know, having a book published is not the reason to stop. That would be tragic, and it sounds so obvious, but it's not like you reach the pinnacle of your life or something. You
Mhm.
know, course goes on, and if you really do love poetry, you'll keep writing or keep whatever your genre is. And yeah, it's given me. I think also um, the love for poetry, the love for writing is because I know how much good it's done me, in the sense of, you know, coping with situations in the Philippines, but also even I was doing one of those writing courses. It just so happened, but soon after my mum died, and this is a few years ago, and I felt as though I was utterly stuck grieving wise. I couldn't cry. But I could write, and yeah, and then later, and I felt how much good it was doing me, in the sense of, I don't know if you process grief, but in the sense of going through it, and later I read about that writing fiction, writing journals, writing poetry, writing is a legitimate form of grieving.
Mhm.
And so I'm in love with poetry just purely out of the good it's the companion it's been for me
Mhm.
in helping me go through stuff. Let alone the joy of discovering, other people's poetry and being touched by other people. And because the thing about it is, you feel as though someone's got to yeah, the nitty gritty of something. Explaining things in maybe sometimes very familiar things in new ways that really, unites us, has a wonderful kind of community feel as fellow humans. Like, wow, you put that into words. Wow, and just recognizing it, resonating with us. So there's a wonderful aspect of community and resonance. I don't know what the word is. Words are. I'll find them eventually. To do with writing and sharing our work with each other. And I think in these days of trying to figure out our relationship with AI, that is going to become so important that we recognize what makes us human, and that nothing can replicate, and definitely shouldn't be taken away from us. But I even got to the point where I wondered if people are using AI so much in so many fields that when someone actually writes a good piece of, say, nonfiction, that there's a hesitation to congratulate each other because we think, oh, maybe it was AI. So
Mhm.
we're not so effusive with our encouragement and congratulations, when there's always this little doubt, like, is it AI? So then it's
Mhm.
stupid to say, it's even messing up that kind of side of things,
Mhm.
let alone yeah, making us think that we don't need to write. Because I mean, don't we? Yeah, I'm sure you have. As a teacher, I'm sure you're confronted with this. But without writing, we're not thinking. We
Mhm.
absolutely have to be writing, whatever. Yeah.
Mhm.
Sorry, that was my hobby horse.
No, 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 I completely agree. I completely agree. I definitely, your point about people being hesitant to kind of offer congratulations and to compliment work is really interesting because I definitely get AI papers as a student or as a teacher. My students do the AI
Mm,
papers. That's what I meant
mm,
to say. Um, and it's really hard because I see a lot of teachers, and I try not to be this way myself, but of course, we all fall into pitfalls. Teachers who come to the students' work suspicious first, and they're like, I have to make sure
mm,
it's not AI first, and it's before
mm.
considering the work. And I understand the mindset because it takes time to grade, it takes time to dig in, and then once you realize at the end, oh, this was actually AI, it's like I put that time in and you didn't put the time into the work. But it's a shame too because I feel like students aren't getting that same kind of consideration right off the bat, and I don't love that. So I try not to do that, but I every now and then it happens, and I understand why it happens, but it's a difficult thing to kind of balance there for sure. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're figuring it out. We really are,
Mhm.
and yeah, all the time figuring out how to master our machines.
Mhm.
It's like the classic science fiction stories I used to love in my childhood, where a monster computer takes over the world. Um, that yeah, we have, if we don't become if we're not the master of our machines, the machine will master us. And that often happens. That seems to happen with new innovation. That there's a horrible time of adjustments where we're adjusting to the internet, or we're adjusting to Facebook, or we're adjusting to AI, where a lot of collateral damage. And of course, you have also players in the field that maybe have, yeah, that's another story, have not good motives. But but we have to figure it out, and we need people writing about it, and we need people thinking about it, and talking about it, of course. Yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm with you 100% on that. Um, And then, yeah, I would love to know kind of where our listeners, readers, whoever might find this podcast in any way, where they can find your work, where they can see what you're up to, find your books, all of that. I can put links in in the little description, but I'd love to hear where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm on Substack. Just type in my name and Substack, and I'm sure you'll find me. I also have a website, Crack Ceiling. But the Substack, but they basically have the same thing, Medium and many stories. But yeah, maybe Substack is the most up to date. Dear Planet, you can get from, dare I say it, from that special, you know who, Amazon. You can Google it, and then it's available on Amazon. But yeah, but so I blog, not very frequently, but every now and again, I blog and usually connect something that's happening in the world or something's happening around me with a poem or something. Yeah, and I would actually like highly recommend to anybody who's even just a little bit interested in poetry, to go to, and this is something I haven't mentioned so far, but one of the things that's really helped me in my love for poetry and exposure to different poets is the Irish poet Padri Gotuma. He has this podcast that's been running for years called Poetry Unbound. And I think, I don't know how many seasons there are. There have been about 11 seasons. But if you go through, if you find it on Spotify or whatever, and they're brilliant little, maybe 10, 15 minutes where he'll read a poem in his beautiful Irish accent. And then he'll reflect on it, whether it's the meaning of it or how it's written or something about the author. And then he'll read it again. And then throughout, there's music specially written for that. And it's one of the best things ever. It's, if you want to have a moment in your day, it's like 10, 15 minutes of your day. And you're, yeah, that was also an incredible lifeline through the pandemic, being able to listen to that. But it's he's still producing it. That's Poetry Unbound. And yeah, you don't have to be, you don't have to be, a poet expert at all, or yeah, or even really like it. I think he's so good on reflecting on poetry, on a poem.
That sounds amazing. I know I'm going to check that out.
Yeah,
I've never
I'll
heard of
give
it.
her.
That sounds really great. Awesome. Awesome. Then that brings me to my final question, the question that I ask everyone, and everyone is probably sick of. Um, but if you could give one piece of writing advice to someone who wants to start writing or maybe is early on in their writing journey, what would you give them?
Yeah, write to enjoy yourself. Don't be too hung up about finding your voice. Your voice will come through. And don't let anyone stop you. And believe me when I say that I have been, my level. That's another whole story. My levels of insecurity were just. I couldn't speak in public, let alone write. Or yeah, and if I can find a voice, then anyone can. And but the most at its core, there's joy, and there's love. There's yeah, yeah. I know people are given assignments and they have homework and they have a book to write, so the joy can be sapped out. But at its core, there's something so joyful in the creativity of writing, and yeah, I wish everyone could experience it.
I love that. That's amazing advice. Absolutely. Thank you so, so much for that advice and for being here with me today. Thank you for having this conversation. It's been really great getting to speak with you.
Thank you. I've so enjoyed talking to you, Sarah.